Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. This is the show where we take a look at every classic Doctor Who story plus a bunch of Big Finish audio dramas, one episode a day, 7 days a week. And today, on the 26th of September 2019, we are starting to look at the fifth story from Series 6 of the Fourth Doctor Adventures, The Haunting of Malkin Place, Part 1. Which is written by Phil Mulryne, and The Haunting of Malkin Place is interesting, because it's a story that is clearly inspired by works of, literature. Most obviously, it's inspired by the works of Henry James. You have, two young people, not quite children, living in a big old house, in a big old house, and and this, and you have this big old house, and in this big old house, those people, these two kids, there's a creepy housekeeper, and weird things are going on, almost a physical haunting. The story's mostly drawn from the James's ghost story, The Turn of the Screw, and so much so that Mulryne references The Turn of the Screw. Early on, you have the idea that the Doctor and Grumman are once again in Baker Street, while K9's, turned on the randomizer. It's like, right, let's try to evade the Black Guardian again, just because he probably won't, just so he won't find us, find us for like a third time. Let's try to actually, evade this guy, which is, it's good. It's a solid way of doing the story. But the actual story itself is kind of, that's just sort of a premise. There's also this like serious note that says, "Don't go upstairs," and it's like, well, we're gonna go visit Henry James's birthplace. So we have something to do, which makes sense. And they meet this on the train. They meet this spiritualist, Talbot, played by Simon Jones. Now, if you don't know Simon Jones, he's a British actor. He hasn't actually been in Doctor Who before, at all. This is like his one Doctor Who appearance, which I think is great. But he's most famous, and perhaps most well known for voicing and playing the character of Arthur Dent in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy radio series and the television miniseries, as well as cameoing in the 2005 film. So, as a comic actor, Jones is great. He and Tom Baker actually have really good chemistry. The Doctor gets to play sort of this role that the Doctor as sort of the eternal skeptic, but he kind of actually plays into sort of the whole perspective of acting like he knows more than anyone else because he's a skeptic, because he kind of does. He is, this is the Doctor we're talking about, a character who who knows, he knows what's going on, and it's a really, that's one part of the story that's actually really quite fun, is the fact that the Doctor acts like he knows what's going on and he knows better than everyone else, because he does, and the first half is basically creepy ghost story. And Phil Mulryne actually uses the cliffhanger to really good effect. There's this whole seance-type sequence, which is, that sequence is just a lot of fun overall, because you have, doing a seance with a ghost story is great, but then the Doctor disappears, which is a great cliffhanger moment, because you don't quite know where he went. And you hear this creepy, childish voice basically saying as much, that he's gone and he's not coming back. It's a perfect way of doing atmosphere, and a really solid way of getting the story moving. Like it's really is really quite clever. Um, and Philip Mulryne, he uses his time incredibly wisely. You have Mrs. Mumford, the creepy housekeeper, kind of, sort of in the governess role. But there's also this really big theme here of PTSD. The brother in the story, Tom, I think his name is. The brother in the story, he's basically, he fought in World War I. He came back and he's basically suffering from PTSD. His name's Maurice. He's suffering from PTSD, and he's trying to realize that trying to be like, yeah, okay, I am living, I'm trying to survive here. I'm trying to come to terms with my demons, and it's a story about someone trying to basically overcome hardship, which is really well done. I really enjoy what really has been focusing on here. It's and you have sort of that nice rationalism versus spiritualism element, and the child's actually really creepy. Turns out it's played by Nick Briggs' son, which, if you need a creepy child, get Nick Briggs' son. Or if you just need a child in general, usually it's the son of one of the producers. And Denise Black is great in the story as Mrs. Mountford. She kind of leaves. She's very minor here, but it's a good part. It really does sort of teeter on the edge of, are the ghosts real? Is this all imaginary? What's kind of going on in this house? Even the doctor disappearing, it's like we don't know if that, at the end, is that looks like it might be supernatural, but it could also possibly just be, there could be a rational explanation for it. We just don't know. And something like that is something that I think works really, really well with the story. So overall, I'm going to give The Haunting of Malkin Place Part 1 a 9 out of 10. Alright, it is the 27th of September 2019, and I was listening to Part 2 of The Haunting of Malkin Place, where this is the episode where you get a lot more science fiction elements, and the story really comes together to be into a conclusion. Perhaps most obviously, because that's sort of a way that just most stories have to. But what is really interesting about this story is that I'm going to talk about the very final scene, because somehow it should undermine the message, but I think Phil Mulryne does a really good job at making it so that it really doesn't. So the final scene has Mrs. Mountford reveal to the Simon Jones character that she's been a ghost this entire time. She was killed on the moors by smugglers in the 17 or 1800s, which is probably the 1700s. And then she just sort of vanishes, which is an amazingly effective scene. Denise Black, who plays the character, does an excellent job, because overall she's been, I don't want to say minor, but she's more of a minor character. She's not a character who's, a big, important role. She's your steadfast housekeeper, there to keep things moving and keep the house in order. But as a steadfast housekeeper, there's obviously there is something wrong there. And what I mean is, now the whole idea is that the ghost can be scientifically explained. Yeah, Mrs. Mountford still is a ghost, and there's something. They are genuinely spirits of the dead. They remember dying. It's sort of, oddly enough, like the whole what happens to Clara and Hellbent. They're almost taken out of their time streams out there just after their moment of death, in their last few moments, and they're stuck to survive. And having Miss Mountford be perhaps an out-and-out ghost, and perhaps a little unexplained, and just adding that vagueness is this nice little cherry on. It's just this nice little cherry on top of the cake. That really, it just adds a lot to the depths of what Phil Mulryne was trying to do with The Haunting of Malkin Place. Because it's such a good ending, and just a really, really solid. It's just a really solid twist that it makes you just sort of question: was everything like this? Because obviously, this is still Doctor Who, and there's still the sense of rationalism winning out in the end. Talbot is he's basically, this entire episode is the Doctor, through a sequence of events, ruins Talbot's life by exposing everything. Like, it's Maurice isn't Maurice died saving a friend of his in the war, his best friend in the war, and it's just like this watch that he was given, that's what, quote unquote, allowed him to come back and haunt Malkin Place. And this watch is drawing imprints from the past and the future. The future is that's where we get the creepy children's voice, which is genuinely an atmospheric voice, and a very, very good sort of addition is just like the creepy kids they're still there, they're still creepy. And the Doctor is dragged along on this adventure while Romana has to stay behind and sort of try to make sense of everything, which could be seen as not giving Romana enough to do, but Lalla Ward's performance makes it work, because it makes her interact with the actual haunting. She actually has to go through sort of a traditional ghost story, the turn of the screw part of the story, because obviously this was inspired by Turn of the Screw, and you really do get the sense that there was a lot of care put in to making this feel like something that Henry James would have written, a Henry James style ghost story, which I do enjoy. I think Phil Mulryne did a good job with that aspect of the story. You really do feel that everything, that this is a ghost story, but it's also a story about coming to terms with grief, all pulled out in the last in the last half, in the back half of the story. It's one of those stories that you actually get something really, really. It's one of those few times where the Fourth Doctor Adventure in Grange does something deeper in an hour than ever it should really expect to. Because you have Maurice's sister has to come to terms with the fact that he did die in the war and he's not coming back. And there is sort of this is sort of reflection on World War I as a war. Talbot even says something along the lines of that something basically along the lines of that it was terrible that we shouldn't have had the draft. It's this amazing sort of reflection on things, and I think it works really, really well. It does a good job of showing where the plot is going and what the story needed. Yet it also sort of ends, for the Doctor and Romana at least, on a joke that the noises in the attic of Baker Street, they were just the Doctor, who, he gets stuck back in time and he has to live 5 years, which is, honestly, that sounds like it would be great for, a series of adventures of the Doctor stuck on Earth, especially this Doctor without Romana, being bored and basically trying to entertain himself for 5 years. That would be excellent. It would be an amazing, it would be honestly just an amazing sort of story, but it's something like that, it's things like that that really tie The Haunting of Malkin Place together and give it a complete story. So overall, I'm going to give The Haunting of Malkin Place Part 2 a 10 out of 10. That being said, we take the scores from this story, add them up, and average them out to give The Haunting of Malkin Place a final score of 9.5 out of 10. Thank you, everybody, once again for watching this installment of the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. As always, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. And join me next when we take a look at the 6th story in the 6th series of Fourth Doctor Adventures, and the first story contributed by Mr. Jonathan Morris for this series with SUBTERRANEA.